Have you ever noticed something strange about the word selfish? The moment it enters your mind, something tightens in your chest. Not anger, not pride, but guilt, familiar guilt. You can give endlessly, your time, your energy, your patience, your emotional presence, and no alarm goes off inside you. But the moment you imagine choosing yourself, resting without permission, saying no without explaining, a voice rises from deep within and whispers, "If you do this, you will hurt people. If you choose yourself, you will be abandoned. If you stop giving, you will be nothing." Carl Jung understood this fear intimately. He knew it wasn't morality, it was conditioning. The first lie you were taught: you were not born afraid of being selfish. As a child, your needs were natural, your boundaries were instinctive, your emotions were honest. But slowly, gently, almost invisibly, the world trained you out of yourself. A good child doesn't complain. A good child doesn't ask too much. A good child adjusts. Love arrived when you were quiet. Approval arrived when you were useful. Affection arrived when you were easy. And so, without realizing it, you learned a dangerous equation. Being loved equals being needed. Every time you suppressed a need, every time you swallowed disappointment, every time you said it's okay when it wasn't, you were rewarded, and the brain learns quickly. Jung called this the persona. Carl Jung called this survival self the persona, the mask you wear to be accepted, the version of you that fits into expectations, the identity shaped not by truth but by approval. For some, the persona is confidence, for others, intelligence. But for many, especially those who fear selfishness, the persona is the giver, the one who is always available, always understanding, always sacrificing, always carrying. You became the person people rely on, the emotional anchor, the fixer, the one who never says no. And the world praised you for it. But Jung warned, the persona is what you are expected to be, not who you are. And the longer you live inside a mask, the more distant you become from yourself. Disappearing in plain sight here is the tragedy no one talks about. When you give too much, people don't see your generosity, they see your availability. Your constant presence becomes invisible. Your sacrifice becomes assumed. Your exhaustion becomes irrelevant. And still, you keep giving because stopping feels terrifying. Stopping means facing a question you've avoided your entire life. Who am I if I am not needed? Jung believed this question is one of the most frightening a human being can face. Because if your identity is built on usefulness, then rest feels like death, boundaries feel like rejection, and self-care feels like betrayal. Why selfishness feels like a moral crime? You were taught that goodness equals sacrifice. That morality means endurance. That love means self-erasure. So when someone says, put yourself first, your nervous system doesn't hear freedom, it hears danger. Because deep down you learned, if I stop giving, I stop deserving. This is why the word selfish carries so much emotional weight. It is not about ethics, it is about survival. The silent emotional contract. Without realizing it, you entered an unspoken agreement with the world. I will carry more, so I'm not abandoned. You over-explain, you over-apologize, you over-give, not because you are weak, but because at some point, love felt conditional. And Jung understood something profound. What you do to be loved eventually becomes what imprisons you. The cost of the mask, the persona, works for a while. You are liked, you are needed, you are praised. But beneath the surface, something begins to rot. Resentment creeps in quietly. Fatigue becomes constant. Joy feels distant. You start helping with a heavy heart, listening with irritation, smiling through exhaustion. And then guilt appears, because you think, I have no right to feel this way. Jung warned that when emotions are repressed, they don't disappear. They move into the shadow, and the shadow does not ask politely. The shadow of the selfless, the shadow is everything you were told not to be. Anger, need, desire, rest, self-interest. When these parts are denied, they don't die. They leak out sideways. Passive aggression, burnout, emotional numbness. Sudden explosions. You begin to feel trapped by the very people you love. And then comes the most dangerous thought. After everything I've done, no one sees me. This is the moment many people collapse. Physically, emotionally, spiritually. The body rebels when the soul is ignored. Jung believed the psyche speaks through the body. Anxiety is a message. Exhaustion is a message. Depression is a message. They are not failures. They are protests. Your body is saying what your mouth never learned how to say. There is a moment in every life lived for others when the body quietly rebels. Not dramatically, not loudly, At first it whispers, a tightness in the chest, a constant fatigue that sleep no longer fixes, a heaviness you can't explain. You ignore it because you were taught to endure. You tell yourself you're just tired, just stressed, just weak. But Carl Jung believed the psyche never speaks randomly. When the soul is ignored, it finds another language, and that language is often pain. The body keeps the score. Jung understood something long before modern psychology confirmed it. The body remembers what the mind refuses to face. Every time you say yes when your soul screams no, something inside you fractures. Every time you silence your needs to protect someone else's comfort, your nervous system tightens. And over time, the cost becomes unbearable. Migraines, anxiety, burnout, emotional numbness, these are not malfunctions, they are messages. Your body is saying what your persona will not allow you to say, I cannot survive this role anymore. The breaking point, the collapse, rarely comes all at once. It arrives slowly, disguised as responsibility. You keep going because people depend on you. You keep smiling because disappointment feels dangerous. You keep sacrificing because stopping feels selfish. Until one day your strength runs out, and the terrifying realization appears. You cannot give what you no longer have. Jung called this moment the confrontation with the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is simply everything you are not allowed to be. Angry, tired, needy, human. The shadow of the giver. When you repress your needs, they don't vanish. They turn into resentment. You begin to feel irritated by small requests. You feel bitterness toward people you once loved. You feel rage, but with no safe place to put it. And because your persona forbids anger, you turn it inward. Self-blame, shame, depression. Jung warned that this is one of the most dangerous psychological states, because the self becomes the enemy. Who am I if I stop? At the heart of the collapse is one question. Who am I if I stop being needed? This question terrifies people more than loneliness, more than failure, more than death. Because if your identity is built on sacrifice, then choosing yourself feels like erasing yourself. Jung believed many people would rather suffer than face this question honestly, so they return to overgiving, over-functioning, over-enduring. But the psyche remembers, and it demands balance. The moment of awakening does not arrive as peace. It arrives as discomfort, as confusion, as grief. You begin noticing things you once ignored, how often you are interrupted, how rarely you are asked how you feel, how easily your boundaries are crossed. And for the first time, you allow yourself to ask, why is my exhaustion invisible? This is not bitterness, this is clarity. Were Jung an individuation? Jung called the process of becoming whole individuation. It is not becoming better, it is becoming real. Individuation begins when the persona cracks and the shadow demands to be seen. This stage feels chaotic because the old rules no longer work. The role that once kept you safe now suffocates you. And yet, stepping out of it feels terrifying, because the world knew you as the giver, and now you are changing. Resistance from the outside world. When you start pulling back, something strange happens. People notice, not because they miss you, but because they miss what you provided. You hear phrases like, you've changed, or you're not the same anymore. You're being selfish. Jung understood this reaction deeply. When you stop playing a role, you disrupt the psychological balance of others. Your transformation forces them to confront how much they relied on your self-abandonment, and many cannot tolerate that. Guilt as a control mechanism. Guilt becomes louder at this stage, not because you're doing something wrong, but because guilt was the leash that kept you compliant. When guilt loses its power, old systems collapse. Jung believed guilt is often mistaken for conscience, but true conscience comes from the self, not from fear of rejection. The loneliness of awakening this stage is painfully lonely. You feel disconnected from who you were, and not yet grounded in who you're becoming. Old relationships feel strained. Old patterns no longer satisfy. You begin to grieve the version of yourself that survived by disappearing, and that grief is necessary, because you are mourning a life built on self-betrayal. The truth about collapse here is what Jung wanted people to understand. Breakdown is often breakthrough in disguise. The collapse is not the end of you. It is the end of the lie that you could live without yourself. Your exhaustion was not weakness. It was wisdom knocking. When you stop running,